Hello, and thank you for tuning into this week's episode of Bite-Sized Cybercrime, the podcast where we discuss cybercrimes and cybersecurity news. This week we'll be talking about some malware that will lock up your Android phone and access the data on it, holding it for ransom. On some malicious Spanish-speaking piracy websites, there are Android app packages being distributed as though they are legitimate apps. But when you sideload the packages, you tend to get a lot more than what you bargained for. And that is a malware known as DroidLock, and well, it's pretty self-explanatory. It locks your droid. Your Android phone. Or tablet, that is. It isn't installed immediately, though. First, you download your pirated cracked app package, and then there's an update request. When you're installing a thing like an app package, it's not so unusual to see something like a request to update it. However, what is very unusual, and that should always be considered a red flag, is that it asks for device admin and accessibility services permissions. Many apps ask for permissions that seem really excessive, but device administrator is not something you should just give to any app. I can't really think of a good reason you would give this to any app at all. There might be a good one. I can't think of one. With the device admin privileges, it can search through your phone in areas that other apps typically can't, and steal data like texts, call logs, contacts, audio recordings, and other data, and it can even delete that data. It gets worse, though. With the accessibility permissions, which there are legitimate reasons an app may need these, it can put an overlay over your screen and use this to steal the pattern used to lock your device. Pattern locks are among the least secure as they are very predictable, and this demonstrates a way to steal them without even guessing what the pattern is. As you draw the pattern, the malicious overlay captures it and sends it to the attacker, allowing them access to unlock your device when you're not using it. That doesn't mean you're safe if you're using a PIN or a password, though, as admin privileges allow it to change your PIN, password, or biometric data, locking you out in multiple different ways, no matter how you lock your own device. Once the attacker is satisfied with stealing your data, they use the same overlay that can steal a PIN to display a ransom note. It tells you to contact a Proton Mail email address to negotiate a ransom or have your data wiped forever. You have 24 hours and there's a timer ticking down. DroidLock is a type of malware that is considered ransomware, although it's not a typical ransomware. A typical ransomware will encrypt all the data on your device, preventing you from accessing the data. Here, there isn't really that kind of encryption being performed. You're simply denied access to the device when the hacker changes your password. Now, your device is just encrypted inherently, most modern phones are, but it's not because the hacker encrypted it. It's because you technically forgot your password, even though it was the hacker that changed the password. So, the point of that is your files aren't encrypted, and they're safe, for now. But they could be deleted if you don't pay the ransom. This malware is interesting to me because it doesn't actually do a lot. It's extremely simple and exploits a lot of native permissions on an Android device, using them against you. The Android security team has added this malware signature to Play Protect, so if your phone is up to date on the latest security updates, you should be all good and it should be blocked. An important note here is that generally, not sideloading apps from unknown sources is a good idea. The native Google Play Store is the safest way to get what you need. Sometimes, though, apps are not available on the Play Store, and in that case, an APK package on the app publisher's website specifically is the second best option. You should also be really careful of the permissions that you allow your applications to have. Anything admin related should never be granted, in my opinion, and anything that seems unnecessary, I personally decline. Sudoku does not need my contact list, just let me play the puzzle. I don't need to know if my contacts are playing Sudoku, and I do not intend to invite them to play Sudoku with me. Another interesting thing to note about this is that ransomware typically isn't really done at an individual level, because the big bucks you tend to get by deploying ransomware against a large corporation. This, however, is targeting smaller individual users who are trying to pirate apps. The reason ransomware groups tend to target corporations rather than just random individual people is because, well, corporations have more money. I can guarantee you, like, every corporation probably has a lot more money than me. It's pretty obvious to target them instead of me. so that you get a single bigger payout from the corporation. I can't afford to pay a ransomware threat actor like $5 million. I do not have that much. They would not get that from me. That being said, a less common technique is to, instead of focus on the big targets, to focus on a massive amount of small targets, so that you can still profit a little bit from every single target instead of just hoping that your one big hit really lands. Because if your megacorp doesn't give you $5 million and just decides to rebuild their whole environment, you spent a lot of effort targeting this corporation, finding their vulnerabilities, crafting the perfect phishing email for nothing. But if you could basically reuse the same malware on a bunch of smaller individual people, then you're probably going to get at least something out of all of those people, and you've not expended all this effort personally targeting each and every single one. You've just put some malware on a piracy site. I guess all of that is to say, although we generally associate ransomware attacks with larger corporations, or public utilities, or governments, it can happen on an individual level too, just usually on a lot smaller level, and it's still a pretty major risk. Mobile device malware is definitely on the rise, as we tend to be using those a lot more than we're using conventional PCs. The benefit that mobile devices have is they tend to be a lot more locked down. Many of them have built-in security-minded features so that it's harder to get infected with malware, but not impossible if you're still not using your device responsibly. All this being said, common sense is the best anti-malware solution. Thank you to Bleeping Computer, SC News, Malware Bytes, and Cyber News for information on this malware and the way it is spread. And of course, thank you for tuning into this week's episode of Bite-Sized Cybercrime, and until next time, stay secure.